So I'm the owner of YouFit Limited. So I started, it's a small business that I started about a year ago. So I'm coming up about on my year anniversary as well, which is crazy. So I have my master's in clinical exercise physiology, and I did my internship while in grad school with neurological and SCI, like spinal cord injury population. And prior to that, I'd worked with like athletes, amateur athletes, like high school athletes, that kind of stuff. And then just through, just some research, I wanted to go a little bit more of a clinical track. And so I ended up landing this internship with this spinal cord injury recovery center. So it's adaptive exercise, pretty much personal training for people with spinal cord injuries. And so it gets very, very complicated and challenging because you've got people who don't have volitional control, which is just voluntary movement. Like they can't do a lot of movements that we can do just voluntarily. So training them and increasing their functional mobility and increasing their quality of life became a huge challenge, but it really changed the way that I looked at personal training. So I did that for a couple of years. And then, like I said, prior to that, I worked with athletes and that kind of stuff. So I had kind of this mixture of experience from a wide range of clientele. And after working at a couple different institutions and facilities, I just kind of developed my own vision for what I wanted training to look like for my clients that I worked with. So for me, personal training is equal parts coaching and education. And it becomes very, very individualized, and I am all about obviously the client, the individual, but it's all about your goals, and I mix like athletic movement with functional movement. And that's where some of this mobility talk is going to come into play. This is the definition of mobility is ease of movement, flow of movement, and it's very much based on like functional movement. So this is training for, elderly populations. You think about driving, walking, that kind of stuff. Yeah? No, it's good? They did?
We're the elderly.
No, she's talking about the athletes that I was talking about earlier. Obviously.
Right.
Tiger Woods, right? Yeah. That's awesome. But yeah. So this fits the gamut for anybody, literally any population, any age, whatever. So we're going to talk about it. We'll go into things a little bit. Let's see if I can hit the right button here. Maybe turn it the right way. That might help. So mobility. So a couple different things about mobility. These are kind of like the basic definitions. So like I said, it's mobility. The actual definition is ease of movement. So that's your ability to kind of go through the range of motion, full range of motion of your joints and your muscles without any like strenuous, motion. So the purpose of mobility is to obviously improve that range of motion. And through that, we're also going to increase blood flow to the targeted areas because we're moving those muscles, we're moving those joints, and so blood's going to have to flow to those tissues in order to get that contraction going, which is perfect for warm-ups. Before you do any sort of physical exertion, you're going to increase the elasticity and improve the contractibility of your muscles, which again is just basically saying that you'll be able to go through that full range of motion and produce more force through your muscles rather than going right into some sort of exercise or sport without having done any sort of warm-up. So I'm going to touch a little bit on, there's probably the biggest term you've heard as opposed to, or like in terms of warm-up would be like static stretching, right? You've probably heard that term before. Just like a basic, like touch your toes. For a while, that was kind of the stigma. That was what was taught. And research has shown that that's actually can be very detrimental to you prior to starting some sort of activity because your muscles are cold, meaning that there's not a whole, there's obviously blood flow in your tissues all the time, but there's not like excessive blood in those tissues, which is going to help protect them from tearing and pulling and straining. So static stretching, you're kind of just like trying to force, you think about like forcing a rubber band, you're like stretching it too far and it can snap if you don't like kind of warm it up a little bit. So your muscles will always go back to that same, length. They have elasticity, meaning you can stretch them and then they'll go back to that original length. But we want to work on that functional range of motion, meaning going through whatever activity you're doing without like overstraining or overstretching or tearing them or making them too stiff. So mobility is going to kind of combine all of those things. We're going to increase blood flow to the area. It's a flow of movement, so you're going to get a little bit of cardiovascular
components in there too, meaning just heart and lungs. You're going to kind of warm yourself up that way a little bit. I put clients through segments. Sometimes they come up, they're like, I'm sweating. And you wouldn't always like pin that with stretching or like a warm up, but and you don't necessarily have to like break a full-fledged sweat, but it's good to get the heart rate up. You want to get your lungs nice and warm before you start doing whatever activity you're going to do. And then I got a couple big, I'm not going to make this an anatomy class, I promise, but so the other big thing that mobility is going to do is it's going to increase the utilization or the activation of synergists and antagonists. So what those are your supporting muscles. So whatever activity you're doing, like say I'm lifting a weight, that primary mover, that main muscle is going to be like your biceps, but then you've got your triceps, you've got your wrist flexors, your wrist extensors. All of those muscles are playing into that movement. And what mobility does is because it recruits more muscles and it's more dynamic, it's going to allow you to warm up those muscles as well as those just like primary movers. Any questions so far? I know I'm throwing a ton at you guys, but I'll try to keep it like on the minimum with all the teaching, but sometimes it helps just to kind of get a clear picture of what we're talking about and why we're talking about it. So I'm going to talk about three main things in regards to mobility. We're going to talk about mobility and how it relates to sport performance, aging, and injuries, and injury prevention more than anything. So, yeah, it's a big thing. Injury prevention is the big one. Aging. Yeah, well, and it happens, and it happens to everybody, and the same physiological things happen to everybody as well. So that's why mobility becomes even more important as you age. So I'm going to start with just kind of like why mobility is important for sport performance. So there's three main things that you're going to see with mobility. One of the big things is going to be, it's going to increase your muscle strength. So this is kind of a non-conventional way of increasing muscle strength. We're not talking about going and lifting weights. A lot of mobility is just body weight. So we're just kind of flowing through movements with your body, but you're increasing your muscle strength by increasing your range of motion. So you think about like basic physics, like the longer your lever arm, so whatever the distance between the pivot point and then what's actually picking up the object, like the longer the lever arm, the more force you can produce. So you stretch that muscle. Your muscle would be the lever arm in that sense. So if you're able to stretch that muscle a little bit longer, you're able to get a bigger contraction, and you're able to get more efficiency out of that movement. Does that kind of make sense? So that's where you're going to see increase in muscle strength and just productivity of those muscles because you're increasing the length of them and the contractibility of them. Another big thing is you're going to increase joint stability. You're going to see joint stability increase through pretty consistent mobility segments, and that's because you're loading into your axial and you're just into your skeleton in general, and you're having to kind of hold your body weight through some of these positions, and that's recruiting those little stabilizer muscles that we talked about before that are going to wrap around those joints. So the more you recruit those, the more you work those, the more stable your joints are going to be. And what this is going to do is going to reduce the risk of hyperextensions, dislocations, fractures, a lot of those nasty things you tend to see with your bones and your joints. A little personal story about me. I swam in college. I was a collegiate athlete, and I ended up terminating my career about 2 years in because I blew out my shoulder. I dislocated my shoulder like multiple times. I had to go to the hospital, I had to get surgery. So increasing joint stability is huge. Take it from someone who knows. It's those risks, and again, those increase as age continues, but it's also through any sort of sport, especially impact sports, that kind of stuff. You really want to have strong, as much as you want your muscles to be strong, you want those joints, you want everything to be nice and locked and stable before you go into those types of activities. So mobility hits that side as well. The last thing is you're going to see an increase in speed and power. So this is kind of playing on that first point we talked about muscle strength, because you're working on your elasticity, your ability to stretch the muscle and contract it. So your contractions, kind of your explosiveness is going to increase because, again, you're able to expand that muscle and then snap it back, because think of it again as like a rubber band. So you're going to get more power out of those contractions, more of that like explosive side. And then also you're going to see a fluidity of movements It's going to increase muscle coordination, and so I put like your efficiency of like your golf swing. So again, a lot of these movements, they are dynamic, they're multi-muscle group oriented, so it helps with muscle coordination, just kind of knowing where your body is in space, that agility side of things, which unfortunately doesn't come natural to everybody. There's some people that, you know, sometimes struggle with that a little bit more than others. And so being able to go through these movements and these flows and that kind of stuff will help with that side of things as well. So any questions on that? Makes sense? So we're gonna move on to mobility and aging. So, and this happens to everybody. But as we age, we see a decrease in a protein called collagen. And collagen is in these connective tissues, so your muscles, your tendons, your ligaments, your bones, all those connective tissues, also in your skin, your hair. And with a decrease in collagen, you see a decrease in some of the elasticity of those tissues. That's why, unfortunately, for females, we get older, we see more wrinkles. We're like losing some of that elasticity in our skin. Same thing happens with your muscles and your tendons and your ligaments. And so as we talked about before, as you lose that elasticity, you're losing that ability to like fully stretch that muscle and get the most out of that, the force production out of that contraction. So mobility becomes absolutely imperative as you age, to just kind of help like ameliorate that decrease in range of motion that comes with that loss of that protein. So as you go through mobility segments and just kind of get your body into those positions and stretch those muscles and those joints and those ligaments, that's going to help with that decrease in collagen and the effects you see from that. So there's an increased risk as you age. There's an increased risk of injuries due to like falls, which can result from, as we know, like a lack of balance, lack of muscle coordination. Again, this is something that happens as we age. And so as we talked about before, mobility, helping to kind of teach coordination, teach balance. A lot of it is very balance oriented. You're working on just one limb as opposed to both. And so really focusing, honing in on balance, honing in on muscle coordination, core activation is going to help with that balance and then the risk of falls that can result from that. And so then kind of just to wrap everything up, there's NCIS did a study on aging and the lack of mobility, and there's kind of this feedback loop that's created that results in decreased general movement, more depression, decreased social activity, then decreased like involvement in those activities. So because you're not able to stretch those muscles, because you're not able to get as much use out of those muscles, you tend to get a little, either frustrated or just there's more pain involved, and so you're going to decrease your general movement, and then obviously that causes depression, decrease in like social involvement, that kind of stuff. So unfortunately there's this feedback loop there's this trend that's been realized as they've done studies on this. So yeah, just kind of the full gamut. There's almost like there's physiological, there's like psychological, there's like emotional effects to mobility, but for the most part, we're touching on the physiological side of things. And so the last point the last kind of correlation I want to draw up between mobility is going to be mobility and injuries. So like I said, I'm gonna go through a couple of these segments that I wrote out for you guys, but mobility is huge in injury prevention, absolutely imperative. And again, this is where you start. Like before you go into any sort of lifting, any sort of sport performance, this is where you start. And this doesn't necessarily mean you won't ever get injured, but this is a great way to prevent that and to strengthen yourself so that you're less likely to be injured through your activity. So the first line of defense, the first thing I'm going to talk about is foam rolling. Foam rollers, I don't know, you guys seen these before? Mm-hmm. It's pretty standard. You can find these at Target, you can buy them on Amazon. They're anywhere from like $15 to $40. You can get like real fancy ones with the little knobs on them, or you can get just the basic styrofoam. The harder the material, so the more packed the material, the harder it's going to be. So you think of like this versus like a rolling pin. A rolling pin's going to hurt a lot more, but styrofoam's a great place to start, and they're the cheapest kind. So this is where you really start as far as really just getting into that tissue. So I'm going to talk about tissue kind of tension. So in your ligaments, in your connective tissue, obviously your muscles are made up of these muscle fibers that all work together to perform this one movement, this one contraction. So again, me picking up this foam roller looks like a very simple movement, but if you go down like really low to that anatomical level, there's all these muscle fibers that are contracting and pushing and pulling, and there's so much going into that movement. So what happens is the tighter that you get, so think about like a rope. Think about having a piece of rope and then it starts to kind of wrap around itself and it gets tighter and tighter and it starts to shorten. You guys kind of know what I'm talking about. Like, I wish I had like a physical like thing that I can show you, but yeah, exactly. You start to it starts to wrap around itself and it gets shorter and you're not really able to get any flexion or move it a lot. So that can happen with your muscle fibers. That's more of like an extreme scenario, and I used to see that a lot with the spinal cord injury and neuro populations because they didn't have any way to contract their muscles, so things would get really short and really tight. And the basic premise behind that is you can't contract something that's already contracted, right? So if your muscle's already like in the short little tensed up position, I can't contract it because it's already tight. It's already fully contracted. So in order for me to get a full, very productive, very efficient contraction, I want to fully lengthen it and fully contract, kind of what we talked about with the force production. So as these fibers kind of wrap around themselves and they get like this, again, you're not really able to see a whole lot of contraction out of them. They're kind of wrapped around themselves, and it causes pain, there's tightness, there's stiffness, you're not really able to move the way you want to move, there's no ease of movement. So what foam rolling does is it gets into that fascia. So fascia is just what coats those muscle fibers. It breaks it up, and that helps those muscle fibers to go from here, and you think about like using a rolling pin and kind of rolling out dough, and it gets into here, and so now you can get your full contraction and your full movement within those muscle fibers. So that's where foam rolling, and another like side of like myofascial release is kind of the big term for it, would be like massage therapy, that kind of stuff. Foam rolling is kind of the do-it-yourself, the DIY version of that. So the methods of foam rolling, kind of the positions you get yourself into, and that's what I'll show you guys next. There's different ways to target different areas, but you could literally roll every single muscle. You just kind of got to use your body and orient it against the roller. So this is where I always start before I do any sort of activity. Anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes is great. You know, target the muscles that you're going to be working, and that's a great way to kind of get things loosened up. And again, you're forcing blood flow to that area because you're pushing on those muscles, you're pushing on that tissue, and your body's like, hey, something's going on. So it starts sending a bunch of blood and all that stuff to the area, which helps you with injury prevention. So the big places, the big hot spots for foam rolling is going to be your IT bands, which is the really, really thin tissue, connective tissue that runs from the top of your hip to the top of your knee, base of your hip to the top of your knee. This kind of holds, I tell people like it holds your leg in place. Like if you didn't have this tissue, you'd be like falling out of your leg. So this is really tight. There's other things that obviously hold your leg in place, but this tissue is pulled really tight. It's a long distance it has to cover, and this connective tissue in particular gets really, really tight when we're doing a lot of leg, any sort of activity that involves a lot of leg movement, or even sitting. Sitting is one of the biggest proponents for IT band tightness. You'll feel that up in the socket of your hip and don't get a whole lot of motion out of there. So that's kind of where that comes into play. This is probably the most painful, and I think I wrote a note on here too. This one can hurt like heck. Rolling out your IT bands can be really, really painful, but it's super necessary in order to increase the range of motion of your hips. This is going to like really affect your hip socket. Another one on the other side of your hip is going to be your adductor. So your adductor runs on the inside of your leg. It's going to go from the bottom of your hip to the inside of your knee. I hope she got the shot. So this one, again, this is like the other side of your hip. This is also going to affect the range of motion of your hip socket. Inside of the leg gets really tight. Rolling it gets a little interesting, but that's a great place to hit as well. And then kind of just to wrap everything around the hip, the big one that I focus on is the hamstrings. So that's going to obviously be the back of your legs. So it's going to run from the bottom of your glute to the inside, to the top of the inside of your knee. So hamstrings, big muscle to roll. That's going to help with, the big thing with hamstrings is that helps with low back pain. When your hamstrings are tight and seize up, that causes a lot of low back stress. because you're tightening everything here.
For me right now.
Right? And this is like everybody, and this, I mean, this is like, these are just the primary things. If you like take anything away from today, these are the things to hit.
Yeah.
So again, hamstring tightness, glute tightness can cause low back pain, low back weakness. So hamstrings, rolling them out, getting that fascia nice and loose is going to really help with that pain. Another big one is to roll your upper back. So I don't really recommend rolling your lower back. It can be a little uncomfortable, but rolling your upper back is really, really helpful for like trap tightness. So sitting on a desk, shrugging, being here all the time, not really open. Rolling that upper back is going to help with that tightness in the upper back and give you a little bit more ability before you go into whatever activity you're going into. And then the last thing is going to be your quads. Quads is in front of your leg. It's going to run from the top of your hip to the top of your knee, or bottom of your hip to your top of your knee. I keep saying that. Rolling these can also be very painful, but that's just, again, a great place to start to increase the range of motion of your hips. So the main ones I've targeted are going to be your upper back, or just your back and your hips. Those are really the primary places to get a lot of mobility, because that's where we see a lot of tightness. It's going to be in the hips and the back, and a lot of that, again, comes from artwork situations, sitting at a desk, standing hunched, driving hunched. So we want to really just kind of reset, think about postural stabilization. We want to get back to good posture. Mobility is going to help with that. Second line of defense is going to be mobility segments. So these are kind of those flowy, ease of movement, multi-muscle, more dynamics, going to get your heart rate going, muscle coordination. That's going to be those segments, and those I have listed on the sheet as well, a couple key ones that have just been my favorite over the past couple of months. And kind of like we talked about before, this is going to be really helpful with injury prevention, with increasing blood flow to those tissues, which is going to reduce the risk of tearing, pulling, straining. And then joint stabilization by loading in your skeletal system is going to help warm up those stabilizing muscles. So a big thing to emphasize, or a big thing that I really talked about on here, and you'll actually see a little bit of this through rolling, but we really want to emphasize your core and your glute activation whenever you're coming into any sort of warm-up segment. So a lot of these mobility segments are going to utilize that. We're going to get the core warm, we're going to get the glutes warm while going through the range of motion of those joints and those muscles. And again, your core and your glutes, those are going to be those center, kind of those crux muscles that are really going to help protect you from any sort of throwing out of any muscles, any sort of joint hyperextension. And just, again, increasing sport performance. You think about a golf swing, all of your power is coming from your hips. Like, all of it is coming from hips. But then you've got a lot of core activation in there as well. So we want to warm up those muscles in order to get the most bang out of your buck. And then the last thing with mobility in regards to injuries, and this can kind of tie in with sport performance too, you're going to get a quicker and more effective recovery. So rolling, not only is it going to help with the tension, that tightness that you get in the muscles, which can also happen after exercising, lifting. You're using those muscles a lot, and so they get really tight. The other thing that happens, kind of like that buzzword, I don't know if you guys have heard of it, but like lactic acid, you get that buildup, and you guys have probably felt that before, where it's just your muscles feel like heavy and sluggish and weak, and there's pain, and it's uncomfortable. So by rolling, you're kind of pushing that lactic acid and going through stretches and mobility segments, but especially with rolling, you're helping kind of push out that lactic acid buildup and get that out of those tissues, which causes a lot of that pain and discomfort. Okay, so moving into more of the demos and the examples. So what I'll do is I'll show you guys these ones, which I have, all of these I have listed on your sheet. And I know there's like super long descriptions on here, but I'm hoping me showing you is also going to help. I try to just kind of give you some cues and just kind of walk you through so you guys can do these on your own. But I can also show you all of these exercises, and then again, if anybody wants to try them, whatever, is pretty open floor plan, and I can kind of coach you through it. So,
Layla's on the move.
It's gonna be time, honey. Woo!
Layla,
Here, honey.
here. Layla,
She's like, She's like, I know what that means.
here, come. Here.
That is so funny. So,
Come on.
I might just have to.
We can move.
We can move her.
I see who the queen is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I can all. It's.
Come on, let's go.
I really don't know you already.
Princess.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm So like I
Good job.
said, most of the segments that I have here for you guys are going to be hips and upper back and shoulders. Kind of the core places to start. So the rolling segments, has anybody ever foam rolled before? Have
Oh,
you
yeah.
foam rolled? Do you know how to roll your IT bands?
I sure do, and it hurts like a mother.
Hurts
Oh,
like
yeah.
a mother.
Oh, yeah.
Do you want to be my little person?
No,
You
not right now.
don't? She's like,
in a lot
no,
of
wait,
pain.
oh, are you?
Yeah, I'm dealing with a lot of hip.
All the hip stuff.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
this is good to do, but
So-
also very painful.
Yeah, right
So-
now it's a bad idea.
Dang, I was hoping I could get somebody else to do it. No, it's fine. I do this like 40 times a day. So again, we talked about IT bands running from the top of your hip, or base of your hip to the top of your knee on the side of your leg, okay? So the best way, and there's really no right or wrong way to roll, there's just easier ways to do it. So what I do is you lay on your side, you wanna just basically just think about applying pressure to that targeted area. So you're trying to roll the side of your leg, so obviously you're gonna lay on top of the roller, and you're using your body weight, and then gravity's kind of pulling here too, and you're gonna go from the base of your hip all the way to the top of your knee. And what I do is I just kind of roll on my side like this, and I go down, and then you go all the way up. And what I've prescribed to you guys on here is anywhere from 30 to 60 seconds of each movement. So that means constant rolling. So we're not trying not to hold in one spot unless it feels good. Sometimes you can kind of pulse on one area, but really you want to get the full connective tissue. You want to still go top to bottom. So that's the adductor, so you'd get on both sides. The other one is going to be, that's your ITs, that's your IT bands, heavens above. Inside of your leg, so adductors. So this one gets a little interesting. You ever rolled these before?
No, I
Inside of your leg?
No.
All right, so big one here. So I post on your back leg, and I think this is what I wrote here, and I hope you guys can understand. So maybe seeing this will help. So your other leg, you're gonna bring your knee up so that the roller's kind of like laying. I start with it on the inside of my knee. Your back leg is gonna just support you. I put both elbows down, and then you're gonna roll out and in.
Yeah, that's always a good movement.
Inside your hip, it's painful. Yeah, guys are like, no way.
My body's like, man, we don't bend that.
Why is she moving the
Yeah.
Right, exactly. It's a weird one. But there's a couple things. Obviously, inside the leg gets really tight. Adductors get really tight, especially when you're sitting all day.
Yeah.
In fact, I would bet a lot of money if any of you got on, you'd be like, oh my, like it would be painful. This tissue, he's on, you don't have to. The tissue, I'm gonna make you demonstrate. The tissue gets really tight, but the other thing that this does, rolling your adductors, so you actually have lymph nodes on the inside, like in your groin, and lymph node drainage is helpful too, because those lymph nodes can get really, really full and swollen, and so lymph node drainage is another thing you get out of adductor rolling. Even if it's not the prettiest one, it's a super, super important one to do. Last one I'm gonna show you guys, the hamstrings, pretty simple. So I start off, I think I wrote seated on the foam roller. So you can get your butt, you can get your glutes in here as well and go side to side. But then what I do is you post your hands behind, and there's a little bonus here. You get a little bit of core activation too. If you keep upright and keep your core nice and tight and go back as far as you can, there's a little bit of abdominal contraction there as well. So you're warming up the core, and we're also releasing that tension there in the back of the hamstring. So top of the glute, or as far up as you want to go, down to the inside of your knee pit, basically. So getting the full hamstring, again, 30 to 60 seconds is kind of the best way to go with that. So that's the rolling for the hips. So the ones that I'm going to show you here, and I'm going to try to angle this so you guys can kind of see me head on. So the mobility segments I'm going to show you, the first one I have there is world's greatest stretch. There's a lot that goes into this mobility segment. So, and I think if you want to like grab a couple videos of these too, and then if you guys want a video of these, of me doing them now, I can send these, and then that might be helpful, because reading it through you might be like, wait, what do I do?
Yeah.
So she'll videotape these, but so what I do, so world's greatest stretch. So you're gonna start kneeling, just on both knees. You're gonna post one leg. I use that term a lot when I write things. So all that means is just heel down. So you're posting one leg up. You're gonna drop your hands down to the inside of that posted leg. They're gonna be about shoulder width apart. You're gonna take the arm of the closest arm to that posted leg. You're gonna drop down to that elbow. Now in this position here, you're gonna feel your whole glute just light up. It's gonna be real, you're gonna stretch everything across that side. So you're gonna drop down to one elbow, then taking that same arm, you're just gonna get a spinal twist. You're gonna reach up towards the ceiling with that same hand towards that leg. And then you're gonna sit back into a hamstring stretch. Does that kind of make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Kind of
Is your
follow
left
along?
leg straight or bent? Like when you're doing the.
When I'm reaching
Yeah.
up like this,
Yeah, I could.
this back leg is
It's 90
posted
degree.
like this.
Okay.
Just kneeling. Yeah, so from the side, so you're here, you drop, you twist, and then you sit back, and here you're stretching your hamstring. Now with this one, a lot of people want to just kind of sit here. Remember with mobility, we want to kind of keep a flow of movement here. We want to be warming up through this segment instead of just holding a static stretch. You're still getting a stretch there. We're going to want to go right back up, and you can do as many as you want. I think I might have put like 30 to 60 seconds, and I would stay on that same side. And then you switch to your other side. Same thing, hands down, inside of the elbow, or elbow to the inside of that leg. Twist up, nice spinal twist. Drop the hands back in your hamstring stretch. It's called World's Greatest Stretch. This is everything. This is all hip and leg. So that's World's Greatest Stretch. Hip internal, external rotation with a back stretch. This one, again, a little bit complicated, but really, really good for your hips, the whole socket. So you sit upright, chest nice and open, heels are up, your knees are bent, so pull your toes up. You don't want your feet flat. You want to just be on your heels. You're going to rotate your legs. So it's almost like a windshield wiper. You're just going to get them to one side, and I say make sure they're laying flat. You don't want them like stacked. You don't want one up and the other down. You want them both flat. So if that means you reduce or increase your angle, kind of whatever feels good. The bigger angle in your hip, like here in your leg, the more you're going to feel the stretch, the deeper. So the farther back you pull your leg, the less of a stretch it's going to be on the outside of your hip. So again, you start here, you're going to drop your legs to one side, you're going to take your arm, opposite arm, you're going to reach across your body. Make sure you guys can see me. Can you see me, Lindsay?
Yeah.
You're going to reach across your body, you're going to follow your knee, and just get a stretch through your back. It looks like it feels awesome.
Well, right now, anything I think would feel awesome.
And it does. And this is going to get upper, lower back, hips, all that. So you're going to reach forward as far as you can. Then you slide back up, reset, rotate to the other side. Same deal, reach. Up, rotate. You can just kind of go through that side to side, 30 to 60 seconds, maybe a little bit longer. That's a favorite out of a lot of my clients. That one feels really, really good because you're getting a little bit more of your back with that one. And then lunge with overhead reaches. So when you're lunging, a mobility lunge, any lunge, you really should be up as upright as possible, chest open, pelvis is kind of tucked, but especially with your mobility lunges, we want to make sure we're getting the most out of that hip. So when you step forward into your lunge, you see a lot of people go like this, or anything like that. You want to step forward. You don't need to step crazy far forward. You want to be up on the back of the ball of your back foot, weights in this heel, and you want to tuck your pelvis a little bit. And when you do that, you'll feel a stretch through your hip flexor, which is the front of your hip right here, and your quad. And then what you're going to do is you're just going to drop down just a little bit, and then overhead reach. You'll reach over towards that leg. So opposite arm is reaching towards that leg. You can do one on each side if you want. I think I just prescribed it with just the opposite arm reaching over. And then with your twist, you're just going to twist side to side, keeping your core tight. Chest back, shoulders open. So we're getting a lot of leg, a lot of quad, a lot of hip flexor stretch through there, and glute activation. So kind of those two main things we were talking about. Core and glutes are important. You're getting some glute activation through this motion. So you can do these as walking lunges. I think I wrote you can do 30, 60 seconds or about 10 yards down and back. I like going for distance. I like moving with these. Otherwise, you just step back and then other side steps forward. But I like moving, reaching. You could do like a combo of twists. Step forward into your other one, reach, twist, get the core nice and warm, loosen up the legs. Make sense?
Yep.
Any questions? Cool. Is it making sense with what I wrote on here too?
Yep.
I feel like they're a little verbose, but there's a lot that goes into these, so I just want to make sure you guys know exactly what to do. All right, last one, shoulder and upper back mobility demo. So the rollings, we talked about upper back. And again, I don't recommend rolling your lower back. You can always try it, but to me it's a little uncomfortable, and those ligaments are a lot looser in general, and so putting some tension on them can be a little painful. But to roll your upper back, so you're gonna be face up, you're in your heels. Here you get a little bit of glute activation too. Start top of the base of your neck, and then go down, ooh, don't pull your hair, and then go down to like just below your shoulder blades. So you get your full upper back down and up, 30 to 60 seconds on there. Sometimes I go up into my trap a little bit, like right up into this part of your neck. Kind of whatever feels good for you, but that's a really good one. The child's pose roll, that one, I think I wrote is fairly complicated as well. So you're just gonna sit on your heels. You're gonna bring the foam roller as close as you can to your knees. I go thumbs up. And then all you're gonna do is extend your arms forward. So you keep your butt back, you're just extending forward and then rolling straight back up. You're getting a lat stretch here, which is this muscle that runs down your back. Super, super important with golf swings, tennis swings, anything like that. That's a powerhouse of your back is your lats. So you wanna stretch them, warm them up, get them ready to roll. So that's a child's pose roll. And then the last one is the clock. The clock's gonna stretch the opposite side. So we're really gonna work on chest in the front of your shoulders with this guy. So you're gonna lay on the foam roller, you're gonna line your spine with it, and then you're gonna take your hands palms up. I'm not gonna do this one because I don't have space, but you're gonna like draw like a snow angel with your arms. So you're gonna get up as high as you can while keeping your knuckles down. If you find you're having to like pull your hand up or anything like that, just go as far as you can without feeling too much strain or having your muscles kind of tighten against the stretch, and then just go back down. So you could do both arms, you could do alternating arms, anything like that. This is really gonna open up the chest and the shoulders. This is gonna feel really, really, really good, especially if you're somebody who works at the office a lot. Just opening up your chest is like huge. So those are the rolling segments for the upper back and shoulders. So these are supposed to be arrows, but I think it showed up as arrows on your handout. So one of the segments is going to be from child's pose to up dog to down dog. It's going to look like a yoga segment, pretty similar to one. So you want to start child's pose is here. So you've got your head down, you've got your hands extended. What I do for up dog with this one, I just stay on my knees. So you're just going to pull your hips through. So I say, like, I think on the sheet I say push through your knees, pull through your hands at the same time. Now the big thing here is you want to roll your shoulders back. I see a lot of people in child's pose, up dog like this. You want to get your chest open. You want to roll those shoulders back. Again, you're trying to stretch these ligaments, these muscles, these tendons right here. So you want to open up here, and then you're just going to flip onto the balls of your feet, push your hips up, head down, push into down dog, hips go up towards the ceiling, back to child's, to up, to down. So that's one of the segments that I have, 30 to 60 seconds, same deal. You could do like 15 reps if that's easier. That's a really good one for shoulders, upper back. Thread the needle to mid-back rotation. So similar to child's pose, you're gonna be seated back on your heels. One of your hands, you're gonna like thread it through the space. So you've got one hand extended, you're just gonna take your opposite hand and just kind of like loop it through. What's up?
He's got our.
I just see your shoulder do that. I got arthritis in my shoulder. I can just hear my shoulder just go.
Shoulder cracking through that.
Oh my God, yeah.
Yeah. So big thing with this. You want to rotate your shoulders so that you're not like you wouldn't want to lay too hard on the joint.
Right.
So I just kind of rotate through, look your head in that direction. You're going to take your opposite hand, loop it behind your head, and then you're going to just nice little spinal twist your elbow up towards the ceiling. So you can repeat this on both sides.
Okay.
If it hurts the joint, yeah, stick away from that. You can kind of just go straight from child's pose, or just do like rotations, just mid-back rotations instead of like having that arm through that space.
Right. Kind of like that.
Kind of like that. Yeah. Exactly. But yeah, honestly, guys, if at any point in time you're feeling like any sort of joint pain or anything like that, like stick away. Don't do these movements, because that is the exact opposite of what we're trying to accomplish through these phases. So last one is going to be the sunrise arm. So this one is going to be similar to that clock one we did on the foam roller. Out of control. So in this one, you're going to lay on your side. You're going to flex your knees and your hips at 90 degrees. I think I said like palms together.
So you're just gonna extend them straight out from your shoulders, palms together. Your top hand, you're gonna draw with your knuckle. You're basically just drawing like a semicircle, up and down. So again, you're gonna open up your chest, you're gonna open up your shoulder, get these tendons nice and loose. And that's gonna feel really good, especially after like a long day of driving, sitting at a desk, anything like that. So, yeah. So those are the segments, guys. Any questions on any of that? Any like questions on what we talked about at the beginning? Does this stuff make sense on the sheet? That's the biggest thing I'm concerned about.
Yeah, just seeing
For
it, yes.
sure.
That's what I was gonna say. And you filmed those too.
Yes.
So then what I can do is I can send, if you have your emails, if you have everybody's emails, I can send those videos out to you guys if you want those segments. Because I think seeing them will be way easier.
Yeah, for sure.
There's no way for me to like paste like a video on there, so that's why I wanted to go through and show you guys, but then we can also send those videos out to you as well and make sure you have those, so.
My question is, should we be doing these exercises before, like right before a workout, or could it say I get up first thing in the morning and I want to do these, and then I get to the workout a little bit later?
I would say do both.
Okay.
I would say do
Okay.
both. So definitely before you start any sort of activity,
Okay.
hit these
Okay.
for sure. Like this is like this is part of your warm up routine
Okay.
before you get into your
Perfect.
activity. But they do feel great in the morning. So, and because like we said, this isn't that static stretch where you're risking like pulling anything that's cold or tight already, because you're going through your foreign range of motion like fluidly. So that's gonna help like reduce that risk of any sort of strain. So honestly, like getting right out of bed and doing some of this stuff is gonna feel great.
Okay.
And you're not gonna risk, or you're not gonna risk any of that tearing or anything that comes with that. So, but I would definitely say before you start any of your activities or sport or whatever, hit this stuff.
Okay.
For sure. And there's so much more. And if you guys want more, just email me and this is like my passion right now. So I've got tons of stuff.
No, this is great.
But these are kind of the key ones. These have been my favorites personally over the past couple of months. And these are the ones that no matter like, and again, I work with a slew of clientele, no matter who it is, these ones have been like stellar for them. So, so that's why I gave you guys these ones as opposed to, any others, but.
No, that's
No, it's a good question though.
I think the clock one looks great, like that for
Yeah,
me.
just
'Cause
opening?
I sit at the chair, at the office all day, so
Yeah.
like, that looks great for me, and
Yeah.
like I want to really try that one because
You should.
I'm tight in my shoulders.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the hamstring too, like the roller, we have a roller at home, a smaller one,
Mhm.
and it's awesome.
Yeah,
We use
it
it all the
is.
time.
It hurts, but it's
It
so
does,
good.
yeah.
The clock, the opening up your chest, it's kind of funny. I'd heard this before, and I didn't know if I really like believed it a whole lot, but I've had a couple clients they tell me they've had like almost like emotional responses to that motion, just because you're opening something that's been so tightened. And there's different theories on that, but that one in particular, I've had multiple people say they were like, I was not even just like the pain, they were just like, I felt like I was holding a lot of like just mental tension in that part of my body. And I've read that there's some sort of it's psychosomatic. You've got your, that psychosomatic connection. And so a lot of time, you think about when we're stressed, we go here. And so that's where we're holding that tension, that emotional stress and mental stress. And so anything that opens that section up can almost develop that type of like emotional response, which has been really funny. But that one's been a favorite for a lot of people. So
Yeah, I'm a big like static stretcher, admittedly so unfortunately. Lindsay tries to break me of it. She's
Don't do it.
She's doing a good job, so.
she's just trying to keep you as a client. You should just tell her to keep going.
Well, I keep snowboarding, so I guess
Oh, there
that's
you go.
coming back. Yeah.
There you
But
go.
My big thing is, I'm not going to be the best snowboarder, but I don't want to like get injured when I go and
Exactly.
fall down. So
Right.
stuff like this, if I
Yeah.
can like
And this is simple.
build it up a little bit,
Yeah, and you don't need to take a bunch of stuff with you. I mean, this is really the only thing is a foam roller. And if you don't want to use that, go through those mobility segments, and you don't need to take anything with you. But yeah, this is going to be big for that injury prevention.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Comments, concerns?